Hey, Jan.
Good evening.
Thank you, Deb, for turning on the recording. It is 6:30 and I believe all board members are present. Welcome, everyone. I will call this meeting to order. And yeah, all board members are present. I welcome all of our guests. And I wish there was a way to invite our guests to participate, but we haven't gotten there yet. So guests, you'll have to hold your comments and then be able to speak to us at another time until we figure out how to do this differently. For now, we just welcome you and appreciate the time that you're spending with us. Let's see, Bridget, are you doing the land acknowledgement this evening? Thank you.
I was talking with the mute on. So yes, I think Debbie's going to cue it up. So we've got some more wonderful land acknowledgements from Showalter students for this evening. And so just in continuing to honor Indigenous Peoples Month and Friday as our national holiday of Indigenous Peoples Day, want to share and center our student voice. So can we go ahead and scroll down, Deb? I think, is it maybe the 6th slide down? There we go, one more. I think, yeah, there we go. Oh, yeah, one more. There's so many good ones. There we go, okay. So this land acknowledgement, is from Francis Salazar. I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal people of this land, the Duwamish tribe, who were taken advantage by our settlers, such as the Treaty of Point Elliott that allowed the settlers to get control of 54,000 acres, and in return, promises that were not met. I believe that the Duwamish tribe, and for the thousands of other tribes that has been mistreated, forced to move in dense and new environments, which these actions affected the population of Native Americans extremely, from the violence, smallpox, measles, influenza, and more, killing over 100 million Native Americans. The Duwamish tribe is not just one of the 200 indigenous tribes that are still not recognized to this day, and among the tribes who are still waiting for the justice they deserve. I truly know. We as a community can still do more, and all we need to do is very simple: take action and spread the word. Okay, so this one's very fascinating writing. Big tribes have big money, which forces the government to recognize them. The Duwamish, not so much. What does this tell you about the government? Well, they clearly aren't living up to their name or motto of serving the American people, and they obviously flunked history class. Now, welcome to my history class, where propaganda withers and dies. You might not know it, but you are walking on sacred land, where not only nature and determination roamed, but also blood spilled by the greediest men in Europe. This land acknowledgement might not be pretty, but the Duwamish want more than words. Keep your promises, sign some petitions, and maybe, just maybe, if we stop talking about fixing issues and get to the core problem, the tribe will be rightfully recognized. And so this was by Jawan and Allahan. The next one is by Aseneth. The Duwamish were stewards of this land, and need vengeance. In the past, they were colonized by greedy Europeans and were ethnically cleansed. They need recognition, and people need the truth. They are still here resisting and protecting their land, and they won't stop until their land and water is healed. by Angel or Engel. We acknowledge that we are on Duwamish land. In the past, we knew that the Duwamish was unrecognized by our government. In the future, we hope that our government will recognize the Duwamish tribe. We recognize that the Duwamish tribe is very honorable in taking care of their land. And by Arlette and Esther, we recognize the Duwamish people are the first people on this land, and they were institutionalized by the colonizer. In the future, we hope to honor and protect this land. We will like to contribute that the Duwamish people should deserve freedom and justice. I think, is that the last one, I think? So just want to honor all the students in Ms. Haley Dursleg's class. These were the students who shared with us their land acknowledgements.
Thank you, Bridget, for bringing in those voices. Obviously, they are learning things that I never got to learn in school, and I think that's wonderful that they're sharing that with us. We move to the approval of the agenda. If you printed your agenda or if you looked at it before 24 hours ago, you may have an outdated version. So the one that was on the website since last night is correct. And the change was to move the annual organization of the board up to number 7A. And so you will see that that was moved from down below in the, I think it was in number 10, and now it's in number 7. And that is according to policy. We just wanted to make sure we were following policy closely. So you will see that. Do we have a motion for approval of the agenda as it is presented tonight?
So moved.
I move. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? If you approve of this as our agenda for tonight, will you say yes? Yes.
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 And a thumbs up is always an option too. That works too, because sometimes it's hard to hear the voices. Oath of office. This is a really exciting time for us. As any of your guests can see, we have a new board member coming on board tonight. Carly was elected in the last election process. So Carly Hoover will join us as a director of the board. From which district are you in, Carly? I can't remember.
1.
District 1. Okay, she is number 1. And I get the pleasure, the honor of doing the oath of office with Carly. So Carly, I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand or any hand that you would like, or both. And repeat after
Not mirrored. Which one's which? I don't know.
I know. I, Carly Hoover,
I, Carly Hoover,
having been duly elected to the office of school board director,
having been duly elected to the office of school board director,
do hereby solemnly swear
do hereby solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Washington,
and the Constitution of the State of Washington,
and will faithfully discharge the duties
and will faithfully discharge the duties
of director of the Takula School District,
of director of the Takula School District,
number 406, King County,
number 406, King County,
State of Washington,
State of Washington,
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Carla, we are so happy to welcome you into this group, and we look forward to the insights and wisdom and experience that you will bring to us. In a minute, we're going to move to our director's report. So when we get there, Carly, will you give us a little intro so that everyone can get to know you a little better? And we will we'll be getting to know you a lot better as time goes on. So welcome. Our next is public comment. So Deb, do we have any public comment tonight?
We do. We have 5. I'll start with the first one and pause in between each one. To whom it may concern, my name is Courtney Martinez, and I serve many different roles in the Takula School District. I am a teacher at Thorndike Elementary School, where I serve as co-facilitator of the Race and Equity team. My most notable role is that of a parent to two students in our district, one at Foster High School and one at Showalter Middle School. It is from these roles that I am writing to you today to urge the school board to nominate and vote for Bridget Apoa Ryder as president of the Tukwila School Board. In the 10 years that my children have been in the district, I have yet to see another candidate be so student and community centered than Bridget. She advocates for the voice of the students to be heard and that of community always. She advocates for transparency and timely communication, something that TSD has always struggled with. She leads with a race and equity lens in all her discussions, which is immensely necessary in our diverse community. I hope that you take this time to also listen to community members and nominate Bridget for school board president. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney.
The next
ahead.
one is from Joe Wanger. Thank you, Board of Directors, for taking my public comment on naming Showalter Gymnasium after Ron Kealing. Following Mr. Kealing's passing, there were a number of past students, staff, and community members that thought this would be very fitting considering all Ron had done for the community, Showalter, the students, and student athletes over the many years. He spanned many generations of the same families as well, and can't name one person who has ever had a bad thing to say about him. Ron's resume would be hard to match by any other staff member over the years from teaching, coaching, multiple sports, middle school and high school, and helping thousands of students in life. Ron was one of the reasons I came back to Showalter and Foster to be a coach for basketball and golf. The gymnasium was his office for countless years and should continue to be his office now in his memory. If needed, I can get more statements from others regarding why we should more memorialize the gym after Ron. Okay, next one. My name is Tutron, an English language arts teacher at Showalter Middle School. This is my 14th year teaching in the Tukwila School District. I am writing about two things: my nomination for Dr. Bridget Apoa Ryder as board president, and to share both my appreciation for her work and dedication to our district and for the work and dedication of two classified employees, the office staff at Showalter Middle School, Yasir Magusi and Andrea Cameron. First, I highly recommend and nominate Dr. Bridget Apoa Ryder for the position of school board president. Her work and dedication is beyond just a written commitment. She regularly and actively engages with community, advocating for our students, families, and staff, particularly our BIPOC members of the community. Dr. Bridget Apoa does more than celebrate and acknowledge our renowned diversity here in Tukwila. She fights to empower it and to give it voice by taking the time and energy to listen and take action. We need courage to challenge harmful policies and decision-making. We need change in the systems that neglect and overstress, and we need vision to maintain solidarity and push us forward, not backward, here in Tukwila. Dr. Apoa Ryder is the right leader for these calls to action. Secondly, I want to share my appreciation for some of the most underappreciated staff at our school. Our new office manager, Yasir, and new attendant secretary, Andrea. It has been very difficult, the transition from a pandemic Zoom year to full in-person, full capacity teaching and learning during a time when all of us are still reeling from the trauma that happened and is still happening as a result of the pandemic. When we sadly lost our office manager to cancer and another to a better opportunity, we feared the worst. But two paraeducators who thankfully understand our school and our system stepped up to take on jobs that arguably require a team each, and yet somehow they are able to keep the entire school running well, with a smile and so much grace and support. I imagined two strangers to the district taking up both positions, who would still be learning on the job months later, still unfamiliar with our diverse populations and lacking necessary nuance and finesse to navigate through Showalter waters. I just know that our school would flounder without these two amazing, hardworking individuals supporting us. It goes to show how important it is to establish good relationships with people here in our district who have shown loyalty and dedication in the face of extreme difficulty. Retention has always been a struggle, particularly now, but some choose to stay, and I hope we continue to show respect and support for the people who carry us to the finish line daily. Thank you. The next one is from Zach. I think it's pronounced Pratrap. He says, hello, I wish to indicate my support for Dr. Bridget Apoa-Ryder for the president of the board. TSD is one of the most diverse school districts in the nation, and as vice president, it is only fitting that she represents the diverse voices of the students, families, and the community that she personally understands and seeks to serve and transform. Dr. Apoa-Ryder has been involved in race and equity teams at both building and district levels and advocates for BIPOC students and families in terms of accessibility to resources and opportunities. The board needs to do its due diligence to elect a very highly capable and qualified female BIPOC leader. And this last one is from Alan Howard, Riley Haggard, and Jonathan Joseph, Takula Children's Foundation, co-presidents and executive director. Dear Tukwila leaders, today we welcome our newest director, Carly Hoover, to the Tukwila School Board. The start of the new term allows us to reflect on the past year and look forward to the fantastic opportunities ahead. We want to thank you for your steadfast leadership through the difficult times our students and families continue to experience caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic recession. It has been difficult for many, but having leaders who listen and respond to the community's needs has made a difference for many. As we look to the future, we are excited about the school board's focus on operationalizing the values of equity, belonging, diversity, and inclusion into all levels of the school district. We are encouraged by the movement to center student and family voices. We will continue to partner in elevating the experience of those who are not at the decision-making table. We appreciate the intentional focus on creating a school culture that is reflective of our diverse community. We celebrate the opportunities for our students and families, specifically those who are most marginalized, to be invited, included, and appreciated as a part of our Tukwila family. We even see this in our school board leadership. Historically, the current Tukwila School Board Vice Chair has assumed the position of board chair once vacant or the term is expired. If precedence remains, we are excited to welcome Dr. Apoa-Ryder to the board chair position. After speaking with a large number of community members, many are encouraged by the history of Tukwila electing community role models in this role. Many commented that it's nice seeing a former teacher or a reverend community leader in this position before. They shared, now our daughters get to see a woman of color who's a mom with young kids in the district, a working professional, and a doctor lead the school board. Many community members shared that having a woman of color in this role makes a difference for so many young BIPOC girls in our community. So many BIPOC girls do not see enough women of color in leadership roles with the support of their white colleagues. Thank you for recognizing the importance of showing this type of equitable leadership, equitable leadership model and supporting Dr. Apoa-Ryder in her new role. This academic year continues to be a challenge, yet with leaders like those in the Tukwila School District who exemplify the values of community, diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can push forward and lead with integrity. Congratulations to Dr. Apoa-Ryder in her new role and welcome Director Hoover to the school board. We look forward to our continued partnership together. That's the end of public comments.
Thank you. Thank you for all who shared. We take your words seriously and we appreciate the time that it took for you to share your thoughts. We look forward to hearing more from you over the time. Move into our reports. Superintendent report, Dr. Herndon.
Good evening. Thank you. And welcome Director Hoover to your first official school board meeting as a school director. So I know you've been an observer in the past and seen a couple of those items, and we welcome you and look forward to having you with the rest of the team. So it's a great moment, and I've always said I have a lot of respect for anybody who chooses to run in an elected position. It's not an easy thing to do, to put yourself out there. So even if people don't always agree, I've got a certain amount of respect for someone who puts themselves in that position. So I appreciate the fact that you did that. That's helpful to us, and I know you're going to contribute greatly to the team. A few items that I will go through. One is, I'm sure directors will also be commenting, but did attend the WASDA conference this last week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Lots of good topics, some pretty incredible speakers and performances by students and adults speaking about lots of things. I think one of the main keys that I took from a lot of that, a lot of talking about just making sure that you're really listening to folks. I attended a couple sessions. One was the one on empathy interviews, and one of the main speakers on Saturday also talked a lot about just being able to listen and kindness. And it's a really great conference to attend. I think it's a lot of good opportunities, and whether you're a brand new board member or you've been on a board for a long time, I think there's always something for people to learn. And the speakers are different every year. So the keynotes and the performances are always great. Some really incredible student talent from around the state as well, which was really nice. So I really enjoyed that. I've had some good conversations with the city. They are looking at, we've had some conversations about hopefully some safety traffic updates in particular areas to make our school zone areas a little safer for travel for our students, especially the ones who are walking. So if you haven't been down near Thorndike, they've put in some new speed bumps on that particular road. I also did ask them to take a look at several of the streets around Cascade View. Their setup is a little bit different than the other elementary schools. They just have like 3 streets that all feed into the school, which makes it a little bit different. Thorndike just has the one road in front of it. Same with Takula Elementary. It kind of loops around, but it doesn't have multiple streets that feed in. So that can be a little bit challenging. But what I did say is, kind of no matter what you put out there, we also need to make sure we're emphasizing to students and families to travel safely. If you're around any of the schools, either as students are coming in or if they're leaving, kids just kind of scatter. They'll cross wherever they want to cross. They cross between cars. A lot of that is unsafe. There aren't enough adults out there to kind of keep an eye on all of them. So we really want to emphasize the safety of travel of our students to and from school. But anything we can do to partner with the city to help make the school zones more visible would be much appreciated. So that's really good as well. And then during the next update, I won't steal the thunder about the vaccination clinics, but we have those continuing, which is really nice. I had a meeting last week with area superintendents as well as the office of the state superintendent and state and local departments of health, and a lot of very frustrated people and not a lot of clear guidance. And I think if board directors stayed for the Q&A for both Tim Garchow and State Superintendent Reichdahl, they also touched a little bit on that about some of the mandates and vaccinations. But as area superintendents, we were able to get more specific about that. And we're speaking directly to the State Department of Health about some things that we think probably are very intensive for our staff, but don't necessarily yield a lot more information about either the virus or changing anything different. So we've made a couple of pleas for them to change some of the procedures and data reporting pieces. You know, there's a lot of information out there, and unfortunately, some of what we're hearing seem to be based more on politics and less on science and data. So we're hoping that we can get back to the science and data pieces as it relates to COVID-19. Other than that, we do have a break coming up, early release tomorrow for those who haven't read or got their robocall, but we do have an early release tomorrow and then no school Thursday and Friday. So I hope everybody enjoys the 4-day weekend, and then we have another couple of weeks and then we'll have a break again in December. So we we have a little bit of a condensed time frame coming up soon, but you know, I don't want people to feel rushed. I want them still to be able to do what they need to do and address our student needs. And I know it hasn't been an easy year, so I'm hoping these next couple of days will be a welcome reprieve. So that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Herndon. Our COVID-19 report. Nurse Hannah, are you ready to report?
Yes. So the first thing would be the COVID vaccine clinic that we had this past week, where we were supposed to administer 150 pediatric shots. Costco snuck in some extra doses, and so we were able to administer 171 total pediatric shots, plus booster vaccines for the adults, staff members. Per the DOH, we began the implementation of the 7-day quarantine with PCR test, which is very beneficial in helping the students, decrease the time that they spend at home and increase the time they spend at school and continue learning. We also have updates on our website. We have FAQs for students and staff members who will be quarantining. And we also have updates that kind of reflect the 7-day quarantine. And then finally, Priscilla Nutu is going to be our new point person for the DOH. She will provide guidance as well as provide us with resources like school visits and also mass testing. And that'll be instrumental in allowing us to do mass testing for unvaccinated sports or athletic individuals. So that is about it for my updates and changes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for all your work, keeping up with a moving target all the time. I forgot to ask if anyone had any questions of Dr. Herndon, but does anybody have any questions of Ms. Maestro? Okay, looks like we got the information we need. What about, let's go back. Did anybody have any questions of Dr. Herndon? All right, you guys have been really thorough. Thank you. We'll move on to our director's reports. And I did not send out a order of speaking. So I'll go first and then we'll just pass it around. I had hoped to have one of our student reps here tonight. We still have one to interview, and I thought we were going to be able to have that person here, but it's a bigger interview process when we actually looked at the policy. So hopefully we will have one of our student reps here next time. And we do have one student rep who is named, and we're still trying to get her on board with us. So hopefully we'll have 2 student reps by the next time we meet. A couple of notes that I have about WASDA. One of the things that kept coming up over and over was a quote, and I wish I left my notebook at home. Sorry, the quote about not going back to what was, but moving forward and stitching a new garment. Maybe someone here has that quote and can give it a tell us who made the quote. But stitching a new garment, and that includes getting all the threads as our way of building a future. And I just love that idea with our community. Imagine what it would be like to get all of the threads representing all the people in our community, our kids in our schools. Imagine what that new garment will look like when we're able to do that. So I'm already visualizing different ways that we can either build something and put it into the boardroom or into the high school, or something that will actually show us stitching together with all the threads of our community. So I'm really hanging on to that one that I picked up at WASDA. Also, one of the things they do at WASDA is they show us students from around the state and the different things that they are being highlighted for. And one of them is Johan Novik from Bellevue. He shared music with us. He is an award-winning musician, plays several different instruments, but he sang a song for us called Legacy, and talking about what matters and what it was that matters to this 14, 15-year-old was highly moving. And I actually reposted his song on my Facebook page. You can go to YouTube and find it. Talented musician with a great message that I think if as soon as we start tapping into all of our students' hearts like this, we will see these messages over and over. So that one, that one really touched me. Also, the other thing that I picked up at WASDA was how strong and steady our leadership has been. We listened to lots of other boards that felt like they had really been floundering and had stumbled over a lot of the new rules as they came in. And in fact, it was listed that there were 125 changes in the last 18 months, either legal or some policy change that came either from the state or from the health department. And I sat there and thought, wow, our staff did this so seamlessly that most of us, at least when I talked to Edna about it, Edna and I had not seen a lot of it. So I just give kudos to our staff for staying on top of all that we've had to go through in the last year and a half, and helping us feel very secure and sure in how we were moving forward. So that is my report for tonight, and I will invite Edna. Would you go? And Edna, after you've done your report, will you invite the next person?
Certainly. I learned a lot this session. I learned a lot about House Bill 1160, and that we need to advocate at the legislature to make things more clear, because districts interpret the wording very differently. So that was an interesting thing. I mean, one district was talking about what is essential and what is not. And they were talking about their cheerleaders going to state competition, and then their cheerleaders going to nationals, which is $7,000. Is that considered essential? So it was interesting, different aspects of things that were brought up. I went to a session presented by Washugo, and they were talking, the superintendent and the CFO presented it together, and their philosophy is they decide what kind of programs and where they want to go, and then they decide their budget. And I thought, what a interesting way to do it, innovative, that I would really like us to look into. Lots of clever ideas for our CTE programs that I've shared a little bit with Jeff, and there's some great possibilities how to incorporate our CTE courses even more than we are at this point. But Carly, would you like to go next?
Sure, I'd be glad to go next. So I did prepare a little director's report, but per Director Bowler-Jack's request, I'll also just introduce myself. My name is Carly Hoover. My pronouns are she and they, and I am just so incredibly excited and honored to be serving the community of Takula, and really yeah, just serving the community of Takula. So a little bit about who I am. I am a native Texan and moved here to Takula about 8 years ago in 2012. And had just really fell in love with the community and of course the Pacific Northwest. I can't ever imagine myself being anywhere else. I play a lot of softball. That's where I met my wife after I moved here. And we've been married for 4 wonderful years so far. We have a few fur animals, no children yet, but I really have a heart for young people. Since I moved to King County, I've been serving youth throughout King County in out of school time spaces. So before and after school programs, other youth development programming. And now I actually have the really unique and amazing opportunity to be a trainer for youth development workers. And so I'm really committed and have always been a person that really likes to invest in others and build them up and help them develop skills to be the best version of themselves and the best leaders that they can be. And so I'm really excited to be in this new role with a local nonprofit here in Seattle. So I look forward to getting to know you all more and for you getting to know me more as we dive into this really unique and challenging work together over the next few years. So just a little bit about some things I did want to report on last week. Really, this last week has been a whirlwind, as everybody has told me it would be, and I know that this whole year is going to be that. And so I'm really just trying to soak it all in, learn as much as I can, and also give myself grace because there is a lot to learn. Last week on Thursday, I had the opportunity to attend the first Takula Elementary Race and Equity meeting of the year and gain some really interesting insights regarding how our district's work around equity is being facilitated and communicated amongst our district staff. I think there's a lot of inconsistencies in the understanding about what the equity toolkit is, and specifically how some guidance and some training on how it should be being utilized. So I think we have a really great opportunity as far as that goes, but it was really great just to be in space with folks. And I've had the opportunity to attend a few other meetings over the last month as well. And then I also attended the WASDA conference all 3 days. Thursday, I was in a full day board boot camp where I feel it was just like blah, information overload, but really, really, really good stuff. And then beyond that, there were 2 really specific sessions that stuck out to me that I believe could really be models in furthering our work that we're already doing around equity, but really helping us transform that work into some real concrete action. So one of those was an overview of the work that's already taking place in one of our neighbor districts that were in Highline, and really identifying how they've navigated and pressed into the challenges of the work over the course of their last years, the last 3 years over a tiered implementation. So I'm really interested to explore some of the work that they've done more and figure out where there's opportunity to partner and learn from a lot of their knowledge and wisdom and experience because they've really been implementing this work for the last few years. And then secondly, I attended that same workshop that Edna mentioned that was called Budgeting for Equity. It really centered on what I feel like was really bold action that shifted resources in a way that actually funds the things that we say we prioritize. So it's really kind of putting the resources behind the words. And I hope that as we begin to learn the ins and outs of how we're determining where all of our money is going and why, that we can really make some hard decisions to ensure that our resources, and that includes money and time and emotional energy, all of those things are being directed to students. And the quote, I actually wrote it down, what Edna said, because I thought it was so powerful as well. It says, they budget for your plan instead of planning for your budget. And that really centers, I think, the values and the priorities that we have, and figuring out how we can shift resources to ensure that we're funding those. So with that, I'll pass it to Director Agpo Ryder.
Thank you, Carly. Welcome. Congrats. So I will share briefly from the conference, and most of my time will be spent on community work that's happening. So from the conference, two powerful, amazing educator professionals, Brooke Brown, who teaches in Franklin Pierce School District, our Educator of the Year, gave a wonderful keynote, and just as a phenomenal educator herself, it sort of brought us along to do some learning together. And Brooke is just absolutely phenomenal. She's been part of the Educators of Color Leadership community. And so I've been kind of blessed to get to, like Brooke is just one of the amazing educators as part of that community. And so just want to give her honor. And then Erin Jones, just another phenomenal educator leader. And she's someone that I just want to also acknowledge. Not only did she, MC, she was part of the amazing work group that happened over 4 months to tailor those professional standards for the Board of Washington Educators. And so she was one of those folks who also did that. And then the last thing I'll share, I attended 8:30 on Friday morning, the Equity Caucus. And I really found myself listening through a lens of similar to, hearing from community, but not just hearing from community, really thinking of ways to share power and wisdom in district policy process. And I had the opportunity to hear from other districts and how they're doing that work. So how they're bringing in, and so like some of the language that was used to sort of identify such groups of community members was a community policy council. So some districts have a community policy. They also have a commission was named, and then like a wisdom table. So how to actually not just hear and take from the community, but actually share power and collaborate, true collaboration in which we're working together. And that includes the sharing of power. So that's different than how our district has been doing things. And so I plan on, just like Carly, I plan on continuing to do outreach to other districts to find out how they're doing it, what has worked, what have been the challenges. And so I just want to, I'm going to share some updates from our community, steering together, and the peer mediation program that was a partnership between the Dispute Resolution of King County, Best Starts for Kids Levy, Bridging Cultural Gaps, is in Showalter Middle School. That funding is coming to an end at the end of the year. And so just want to kind of recognize that now more than ever, we need restructuring how we do discipline and avoid the school to prison pipeline. We need to empower our young leaders, young scholar leaders, in empowering them and learning and being able to do mediation, that our youth have amazing abilities to do this work. And we need to also make sure that when there is a dispute between an adult and a youth, that there also is mediation, not so much just discipline. And so just very important work. I've watched year after year groups of students blossom in their social emotional learning, and I've watched them become leaders out in our community. So just very important work. I'm hoping that as a district, we really look at not just a one-time shot, but to really, there's been a lot built. How can we continue to sustain? But then I've also heard from parents who want it in other schools. They just don't want it at Showalter. And so that's something to think about. Another event in honor of Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week. Director Bullerjack was there. We had Stillwater's Family Services, home of the Takula Weekend Snack Pack, hosted a community conversation. And there were about 26 community leaders, community partners that were part of that conversation. And there was interest to continue the conversation, to really learn from the richness of the people who are serving our community and the community, and what's going on, and how we can try our best to really transform hunger and homelessness in our community. Had the opportunity to attend trans language trainings, and Ari Salas Servina was the facilitator of that. And I attended one of the trainings. I think there's been a few, and I think there was about 21 people, I think, there from across the district. And it was powerful and it was awesome. And something that I really took away from that is that translation alone does not meet the needs of our community. That when people are translating word for word, there's a lot of other contextual, cultural considerations and acculturation considerations that get lost, and that it doesn't fully serve students and families in that. And so really looking at ways, and so there's I've got tons to learn, books to read, but just encourage people, especially our board, to look into this, because it's not just about translating. It's really understanding the needs of language learners. And so King County Directors Racial Equity SPED funding. So there's a group of directors in King County who are advocating for equitable funding for specialized needs services, and that not all students currently, the way, and we've heard Director Larson speak about this, oftentimes it's like a single sum, and that each student sort of gets a sum, if you will, and that is not meeting the needs of the students. And so really, and for our small districts such as ourselves, that's very problematic for us, because we're having to do a lot with a little in terms of like even infrastructure. We do amazing, but it's a lot with a little. And so really being able to advocate, and also advocate for our Black and Latinx families who I had mentioned, the school to prison pipeline. That's another thing that continues to happen with SPED, where students are being disciplined instead of their needs being met. So that is another piece of community advocacy that our district is partnering with other districts on. And then the last thing I'll share, I got a chance to go through a three-part training. The South King County Discipline Coalition offered a three-part training. The first part was, what is the disciplinary process? And so broke down, according to OSPI, what should happen if a student is going through the disciplinary process. Then the second part was talking about the appeal process. And then the third part was a continuation of the appeal process. That coalition is absolutely amazing and doing phenomenal work. Charisse Rhodes, Mahogany Tucker were two leaders. And we also had lawyers from a group called Team Child. If anyone has ever heard of Team Child, that assists families experiencing foster systems and families that are experiencing issues in terms of rights and making sure that the districts are upholding their end, and that students and families know their rights. And so that was very, very helpful. I encourage any of us to look into that training or learn more about the South King County Discipline Coalition. And that's what I've got. Thank you, everyone. Oh,
Thank you,
Director
Bridget.
Larson.
Yes.
Thank you. So start out, so this is the time, the decade when we get the census data is coming in. And so what that means for the school board is that we need to be reviewing our director district boundaries to, make sure that they're, equally divided and so forth. So hopefully we'll, when that needs to be done, obviously before the next election, which is in 2023. So we should get that on the list. There's groups that will kind of collect all the data for us and present it and break it down by race and so forth. And so anyway, I just want to make sure we get that on our list of things to do here coming up. I also wanted to talk about the robotics program that I've been working with at Cascade View. It's really been an amazing year because the students in that class this year are getting so far advanced in the curriculum that we've ever seen before. And the reason for that is not accidental. First of all, we've had several technology upgrades for them. So the Creative Learning Labs at Cascade View is open now, and So the screens they're working with are bigger, which makes a big difference when you're doing this robotics work. We're using a wireless technology to connect the computers, which is where the programming goes on, to the robots, and the reason that's important is because it means they can do their testing quicker, and they get more productive, and the more productive they are, the more they'll learn. And so it's a really good cycle there. The other thing is the Creative Learning Labs teacher up there, Estelle Kim, during COVID, had them learning Scratch, which is the programming language that they are using to do the robots. And so in the past, the students would kind of struggle a lot getting used to programming, but now they're really all comfortable, ready to go. And so, that's a good victory for, a really good teacher who did a great thing during the COVID period. And now the students are really comfortable with programming. And so, and of course, the other thing is that interesting. So Christy Johnson and I have been doing this, the teacher up there, for years, and Estelle Kim is doing it this year. So there's now 3 adults in a class with 15 students. And so the 5-to-1 ratio really works well for getting the students going. I wish we could have all our classes at 5-to-1 ratios, but anyway, it shows you what can happen. And the other thing is, I'm glad to see that Showalter is getting a grant for their to upgrade their robotics programs, because these students are going to be coming with higher skill levels than anybody's ever seen before at Showalter. I can guarantee that. So anyway, that's some good news. Wanted to report quickly on the General Assembly. This is the School Directors Association General Assembly, where the association votes on various legislative positions. It's turned out this year to be a 10-hour Zoom call spread over 2 days, which is not my favorite thing to spend that much time on Zoom, but anyway, it got done. We did get the one that we submitted, which was to reduce barriers to post-secondary education. That one passed 99%. The one we did last year, which was regard to staffing, particularly staff support positions, counselors, nurses, and social workers for high poverty schools. That one also passed again this year for the second year. The other thing that was really, for me, significant this year is this is the first time the association passed an equity-based funding system resolution, which says that basically the funding system should be based on student need and not just the same per student. That one took, it's taken me several years. That one actually, the one that passed was proposed by Martha Rice over in Yakima. And so I'm really happy that that one made it through this year. And so that'll be a good base to work with WASDA and their advocacy efforts for the legislature. There was another one that also passed 100% support, providing full support for all the McKinney-Vento students. That's another one we've been working on for a while. So anyway, so I got, the priorities that we discussed at the last couple of meetings, I got those in because all the ones we had on our priority list passed. So I put those in. They haven't reported back the results from that, but hopefully maybe next time we'll have that. Let's see. Okay, the other one I wanted to talk about just briefly was so I had a meeting with Representative Hackney and Berquist up at Foster High School, and it was a really good meeting. We had all the counselors from Foster High School were there. The social workers from Showalter and Foster were there. Principal Mr. Blanton was there. Dr. Hernan was there. Director Poe Ryder and I were there, as well as Mohammed Abdi, who's a recent graduate of Foster High School and now Takula City Council person, and really did a good job. We were talking about kind of educating the representatives on the inequity in the funding system, and particular with regard to all the support staff that we need. And so it was really good. Representative Hackney, this is he's only had 1 year in the legislature, and I don't think has fully absorbed all this stuff until he sat and listened to our staff talk a lot. And at the end, he was definitely clued into what was going on. And I think he's going to be really helpful for us as we go forward on this issue. He was definitely wanting to know more about it. We also talked with him, since he's on the Capital Projects Committee, which is the committee in the legislature which kind of doles out money for capital projects all around the state every year. And we clued him into the need in for some changes, renovations in the Performing Arts Center, and also this South 144th Street Bridge, the safety issues. So he's going to be looking at those, and I know Dr. Herndon, I think, is going to follow up with him on those two as well. So I'm happy to have this first time we've had somebody on the capital projects committee, so that'll be really, really helpful in getting some of those projects funded. The other thing I attended was the Equity in Education Coalition Conference. And there was a lot of good things there. The one that I wanted to talk about was this presentation by a group which used to be called Seattle Education Access Group, and now they're called Northwest Education Access. They're a group that provides mentoring services for high school and college students to help them as they navigate, all the ins and outs of the education system, and keeps them on track as they're going through their education. They used to only work with Seattle School District students, but they've recently expanded to include King County and Pierce County. And they're a really good group. They emphasize a lot working with students of color, students, from underrepresented groups. And the nice thing about them that I don't think anybody else does really is they will stay with students. They may start in high school, but they'll stay with them through college. And I know a lot of our students, they graduate and then they get to college, and there's, they run into some issues that, navigating that whole system is a whole other thing. And it's tough for us to keep track, but I'm hoping that, I know listening to our counselors, they're kind of overwhelmed at this point, but for a variety of reasons, I think this would be a really good group to connect with. I don't know, Dr. Herndon, do you know, do we have anything going on in this group?
I don't think we have anything on a consistent basis, but I'll make sure that we get connected with them.
Yeah, I'll send you some information about who I talked to, because they sound like a really good organization to be connected to. I did read one of the books that Mr. Howard was recommending, Powerless to Powerful. Is a really interesting book. The premise is kind of that, you need to really enable the staff to get together and look at data, figure out what needs to be done, and basically empower them to drive the train along with community and student voice as well. And reading the book, it was interesting because they were, apparently this had been done at Sunnyside High School, which they, in the book, constantly talked about the graduation rate had gone from 49% to 84 in 4 years. And I was sitting there thinking, well, Foster High School has gone from 55 to 87 in 6 years. And so I think, and I know some of these processes that they were talking about in the book have been going on at Foster for some time. So I just, I was just thinking, to some degree, this book, I think Foster has a lot of things that they were doing could have been written about them as well. So the other quote from this book, which struck home to me a lot, is that you need to use data to inform and not to punish. I mean, that's a big one that has been around for a while. So the last thing, just to touch on a couple of things from the WASD Annual Conference. I did also go to the Highline presentation. I thought that was a really good, listening to their race and equity work. They've been focusing a lot on identity. And this was a concept that Brooke Brown, also in the Teacher of the Year, talked about. She's an ethics studies teacher as well. And they focused on, initially having all the students kind of write down, how do they identify? It's not just race and gender, but interests and, who they're connected to and all kinds of things. And, it's a really good way of, I think, it sounds like, of getting connected to helping the students to connect to who they are. And then from there going on to, okay, what do we want to do? What are some things we want to take action on and so forth. So anyway, that sounds like I'd love to get, I was thinking about, I'd love to get a word cloud of all the things that students think they are. It would really be an interesting exercise to help us understand who our students, feel like they are. Let's see. Also, I attended the WASD onboard session on equity, and they were we're working on this issue of diversity and inclusion as well. So this a lot of ties into understanding, identity for, leads to inclusion along if you do all the things well. So thinking about all this is really interesting. And the final one I think a couple of people mentioned it, the Quincy empathy interviews. I think that's a really good, I was listening to how they did that. And there's a whole lot of things that we could use from that. They use their community. I mean, the concept is that, you can survey people, multiple choice things, but what you really, and that can have a place, but in addition, you need to be able to sit down one-to-one and talk with somebody that you have a relationship with. So in our case, for example, and also in the case of Quincy, they have community liaisons, and they have, the one-to-one relationship with a lot of people in the community, and you sit down and talk with them in some open-ended questions. And, there's a lot of stuff that you can get from that. So that whole process sounded really interesting. I, have some information from them. So that would be good, particularly as we think about talking, opening up our family community engagement things. That's, if you think about, and you need to think about the questions beforehand, what it is that you want to kind of probe into. But anyway, there's a really good process there that I think is really relevant to us. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Wow. Well, I hope that those of you that are observing or the staff that are listening can tell how passionate your directors are about the things that we're learning and caring about and the exploration we're doing, and how excited we are to be bringing a lot of this into our work. Thanks for those reports. We move on to the consent agenda, which includes the November 9th meeting from the board work session and the regular board meeting, as well as the approval of warrants. Do we have a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Then I invite you to give a thumbs up or say yes if you approve the consent agenda.
Yes.
All right, it has been approved. That moves us to our annual organization of the board, and we have a very extensive policy about how we do this. And so I'm looking at the policy, and what we're doing tonight then is nominating and electing our new officers for the coming year. And so that will be our president, our vice president. And do we do the ledge rep this year? No. Okay. All right. Thank you. So president and vice president. So I will, unless I've missed something, I will open the floor for nominations.
I'd like to nominate Director Dr. Bridget Akpoa-Ryder for president.
All right. Carly nominates Dr. Akpoa-Ryder for president. Are there any more nominations? Seeing no other nominations, we'll close the nominations. Is there any discussion, or do we do discussion on this?
No, Dr. Akpoa-Ryder needs to accept the nomination.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Would you accept the nomination, please, Dr. Akpoa-Ryder?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then we will.
So do we nominate vice president at this time, or do we do that next?
I
That
think we do
happens
that.
next.
That happens next.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Double check.
Yeah, fortunately, we only have to do this every once a year, so we sometimes forget about how we're doing it. So I will call for a vote, and it has to be a roll call vote, which means each of us needs to answer aloud. Is that right, Deb? Yes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So Dr. Akpoa-Ryder is up for nomination for president, and each one of us needs to affirm or not affirm. And I'll start by affirming this nomination. I want to thank you for the honor that I've had of serving in the interim as your president. It's a kind of a scary, but also an awesome privilege to be in this position. And I'm welcoming Dr. Paula Ryder into this position, and will do all that I can to support her in being successful here. So that's an affirmation. Director Larson.
You're looking for a yes or
An affirmation.
affirmation? Yes. I vote yes.
All right. Director Morris.
Yes.
Director Paul Ryder.
Yes.
And Director Hoover.
Yes.
All right. So we have a unanimous election of Dr. Paul Ryder as president for this coming year. Congratulations. And you will take over in just a second. I think I still run the vice president election. Is that true? Okay.
Yes.
So we'll open the nominations for vice president for the coming year. Do we have a nomination?
I would like to nominate Director Bolachek. And at this
And-
time,
And
can I,
I will accept that nomination.
okay. And can I make a comment at this time?
Of course.
Okay, well, I'd really like to express gratitude to you for your leadership during this time and leading us with wisdom and insight. The last few years, Jan and many others have been an integral part of establishing support and funding for race and equity. She's constantly in the community advocating for students, families, and their needs. And I appreciate Jan's innate ability to be inclusive as she embraces everyone, their thoughts, their ideas, their concerns, their needs, and in being responsive to some staff and some community members' requests. And in order to move us forward, I've agreed to the recommendations for presidents and nominating, and I'm now nominating Director Bolachek for vice presidency.
Thank you, Director Morris. Nominations are still open. Are there any other nominations for vice president? All right, we will close the nominations and we will take another roll call vote. I will look to Dave again for affirmation or not.
Yes.
Yes? Okay. And Edna
Yes,
and Bridget
Yes.
and Carly?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, you get that mute button sometimes. It's hard to find, isn't it? Yes, so thank you. I will gladly assume the role of vice president and help in whatever way I can as we're moving forward here. So I think at this point we say congratulations to Bridget, and if I had a gavel, I'd give it to you. If I had a red high-heeled shoe like Tracy always used, I'd give it to you, but instead I just welcome you and invite you to take over, please.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just want to second what Director Morris said about how this group of people and people who served before us have worked hard to serve our community the best that we can. And so just want to give honor to every one of us for the work we've been doing on the board. And so I'll do my best to serve folks, and hopefully the community and will hold me accountable too. So we'll go ahead and move on to, I believe, can you scroll up a little bit to number 8 there? It's off the screen for me. There we go. So questions only presentation. So these were presentations that were released earlier for us and the community to review. We had an opportunity to ask questions and hear from our district leadership answers, which those will, if they're not already shared, they will be shared on our board docs. Why don't we go ahead and just start with A? Are there any follow-up questions for financial forecast? No? All right. B, graduation rates.
Yeah, I had question. I'm not sure who this is going to be directed to, but so there's a significant uptick in this last year in the dropout rate for particularly Black students, white students, Asian students. And I'm just curious as to, any programs or any things we have in place to try and reconnect with some of those students. There's a question I asked, and looking at the answer, it looks to me like it's describing things that we have in place for students that are in school, which is great to prevent them from dropping out. But my question is kind of, do we have anything, and maybe this might be, with a community-based organization of some sort, to try and reconnect with some of those students that we lost during the COVID period. And, if, this would be a potential for me for using maybe some of our ESSER dollars. And if there's a community-based organization out there, it could be Northwest Education. I don't know who does that, who can do that work, but I'm just curious if we're thinking about how to kind of reconnect with some of those students that we lost contact with this last year.
Yeah, I can, I'm not sure if Mr. Howard has additional information, but there are several organizations that are around that do this kind of work. And this is the kind of stuff that's happened even previously. Some of the challenges I believe that we're facing right now is just not only that increase in dropouts, but just downward trajectory in enrollment for lots of places. So we're trying to find where a lot of students are right now. So yes, any of those funds would be applicable, and things that we are definitely trying to figure out what are some of the more effective ways that some of these organizations may have already used to try and find some of the students. But yeah, I mean, obviously we want to be able to get students. I mean, I always love an on-time graduation rate, but I just want our students to be able to graduate, even if it takes them a little bit longer. So not all students are the same, and they're not always on the same time track, but I just want to be able to continue to support them. So we'll continue to engage. I don't know if Mr. Howard has anything more to add, but I know that is a strategy that we have used in the past, and I don't know if we're going to be using those same organizations or not.
And so we've started touching on enrollment reports as well. So any additional follow-up calls or follow-up questions?
I have a few. And I want to apologize or name that I did not get my questions in on time, and I will do that more effectively in the future. I think just working through all of this took me a minute, so sorry about that. But I do have just a few things I wanted to ask. Definitely noticing some fluctuation in enrollment, and I was just kind of curious to hear from folks what fluctuation is expected and normal, and then when might you see a drop in enrollment where you might get concerned and decide to examine that data a little bit more closely.
Yeah, enrollment, I can speak a little bit to this. Takula has been in enrollment decline for some time, but we're not the only ones, especially in King County. So there's a lot of that tied to cost of living. Housing is often attributed to that. So that's something that we're definitely wanting to see if there's a change. Usually if you're one district, but everybody else is growing around you, that's a little bit different story where you can pick that out. But when you see several districts enrollment declining, then that tells you a little bit more about the region. In general, it's attributed to housing costs, but that's not everything, but that's certainly something. The state overall currently is down about 4 to 5% of public school enrollment. So the state in general is trying to figure out where all those students are as well. It obviously varies from region to region. But in our particular area, kind of South King County area, it's about 1 to 2% decline around for the districts. And again, that varies. There are a couple that are down a little bit more. For instance, Federal Way is down a considerable amount, probably closer to 10%. We're not down quite that far. We don't know exactly when that might bounce back. There's a hope that the vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds might change that. But we'll just have to wait and see. So we do track those trends every year to see if there's something in there that we have. In the past, we've also, because of Takula's proximity and population with recent immigrants to the US, sometimes immigration policy at the federal level can have an impact as well. So over the last couple of years, the immigration policy and tightening of immigration has had an impact on our enrollment as well. So those are just a couple of answers, but tracking enrollment is it's a challenging piece. So usually if you, I've been doing enrollment work for probably 10 years or so. And there are a couple of people who do enrollment work. Davis Analytics is one, which we've had do enrollment projections for us. There's another person who does a lot of enrollment projections for school districts. And it's interesting because, they take into a lot of the pieces, but they always give you a range that almost anybody could do just by statistical analysis. So they give you a low, medium, and high. And it's like, well, shoot, your variation is like 15% between the low and the high. So part of it is just having to do the work a little bit. And we usually do an offset between our enrollment projections and then our budgeted, because we don't want to come up too short on the budget side if our numbers come in. So we always like to budget a little more conservatively on the enrollment projection side until we see a trend that may be reversing or stabilizing.
Yeah, I think the immigrant thing is refugee is a big issue. Before the Trump administration came in, we had about 300, refugees or so in the district from year to year. And, when Trump's administration came in, they basically shut that off. So we're now down to, I think the last measure we got 40. And so, that was during that period, that was about the, how many students we lost. So that, I think, was a big part of it. Now, how fast that'll come back is anybody's guess. Obviously, COVID is putting a stop on that, but the Biden administration has indicated they're going to open up, immigration again, which, assuming that those students come back, could help us. So.
Thank you so
I
much.
know that also, and with other families, the affordability of housing in this area, that oftentimes I've seen that happen where my kids have friends that have had to move out of the district because they can't afford, or there's no longer affordable housing. And then also with the impacts of COVID, that there's quite a few folks that have family members that have lost jobs or with illness, and then the anti-rent moratorium being lifted. I mean, there's all these other factors that are going on, as well as charter schools, which is something that's expanding each year as well. Carly had something to share.
Yeah, I think kind of a comment. Thank you so much for that. That's helpful. And so it sounds like we're pretty in line with what's happening in the region for the most part, if not even a little bit under some of our neighboring districts. And so I'm assuming that like the uncharacteristic drop in enrollment between September and October specifically, that was really different from years past, likely has to do with COVID. And I assume too that is. Have you seen that similar trend, Dr. Herndon, in other districts?
Yes, and it also depends. There are a couple of districts that have done some virtual options for some of the students, and so they take advantage of that. And then that FTE is assigned, so they can be close. They can still reside in a district, but basically do a virtual option almost anywhere. That's an interesting piece to watch because virtual education options have been available for decades in the state of Washington, but they all have to be approved by OSPI, both the school and the course offerings. But what you will frequently see is that students, especially who have IEPs, generally are enrolled less on that, and they rely on the local school districts to support those IEPs. So sometimes the students end up coming back to us. So we get a bit of a boomerang effect for some of the students, but it just kind of varies. So yeah, I think the COVID is just such a wild card on this and vaccinations. I think we'll definitely know more in January after we've had a couple months of vaccination possibilities, and then going into spring, hearing what we'll be hearing from everybody else. As superintendents, we all chat with each other to hear if there's anything or any trends happening in the region. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that.
Anything else? All right, we'll move on to D. Any questions, follow-up questions for D?
So the question I have on this one, this will be for our CFO, Ms. Birdsong, I think. ESSER 3 is listed. So I'm looking at the October report on page 12, where all the monthly grant and categorical funding report is. And it lists ESSER 3 as $2.3 million. I know it's a lot bigger than that. I wonder, is this being chunked into, is this being kind of allocated to us in pieces, or what's going on there?
Hi, Dave. Thank you so much for the question. Yes, ESSER 3 was distributed in two pieces. The one that's on the budget status report is the 20% for the learning loss set aside. So that was included in a 21-22 budget, because between ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 was a big chunk of money. So the remainder part of ESSER 3 is in the 22-23 budget.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
So I had a follow-up question, and this is an answer from Ms. Chen. One of the grants was a tribal language heritage grant, and it was written as an answer that it's a 2-year grant. I just wanted to learn a little bit more about that grant and how our tribal families know about this or will know about this moving forward.
We did not apply and receive the tribal grant money. We got a heritage language grant, one for this year and next year. So yeah, and I have been, if there's a tribal money, it's there, but I didn't apply this year. If that's something that we would like to pursue, please let me know and we can work. And then, because we currently have 22 Native American students in our district, and most of them are in secondary level. There's only one in elementary. And we are monitoring their progress through Title III and give them support if the parent consent.
Yeah, I this past fall, I've heard from several community parents who,
Right.
For example, one parent has 6 students in this district, and her student talked about transferring to Highline because they have a tribal program and we don't. And so just a heads up, I'm sure that parent would so if I can send that parent your way, maybe you can talk with them more about how to make sure that our students are getting what they need.
Yes, please. We are learning. We have several meetings and learning from other districts what they are doing to support our Native American students. And that's something we are continuing to work on. And I would be grateful if you would point the parents my way.
This community member also is very savvy on funding because she's very active in the tribal communities. So there is resources out there. And so this might be an ally for our district as well to help create something more for our students.
That would be awesome. We need a partnership, definitely.
All right, anything else before we move on to 9? Presentations, board policy, first read. So who's presenting this one?
I think I'll speak to this. Let me just pull it up. All right, we've got, so there are several policies in here. We're not going through all of them. As you can see, there are several. So usually in this particular, when we have the number of policies here, if there are a number of policies in here and board directors have questions about any of the particular policies being presented, we would then take that information and the notes, modify that, and then bring the policies back for another read and approval if we're meeting all the modifications or edits that the board directors are interested in.
Are there any questions or concerns for these?
Yeah, so there's the, let's see, there's the naming policy, and then the rest of them are all the related to the mastery-based learning clause that got added in, which I'm fine with all of those. On the naming one, so there's a proposed to basically get it conforming to the WASDA model policy by including school team and mascots logos or images will not be Native American names, symbols, or images. And so you included here both the policy as well as the procedure. And first thing I'm wondering is the procedure, you changed it to the title to naming school facilities and teams and use of mascot images. I'm wondering if the policy title shouldn't be consistent with that because we are talking about use of mascot and images as well.
Yeah, it probably should. We should be consistent on the policies and have the procedure for each particular policy, not group them. Yes.
Okay. And then the other, this is just kind of when I was reading through the policy, we're talking about new district buildings and facilities will be named after persons, who have attained national or local prominence, fields, military stations, and after past presidents or Washington national senators, or geographic characteristics of the area. I'm wondering if that is kind of restrictive. I mean, for me, I'd be open to, this is one where I'd kind of like to get some community input on what folks would like to have in their names, because I mean, I'm open to, much more than just this. If there's community members who want to name, for something other than just what's here, maybe even not people, just people or geographic characteristics, maybe something else that I haven't even thought of. So I think for me, this would be a good one to kind of see if we could engage some community folks in helping us. I was doing a little research. Our current schools, I guess, are named for, well, it's interesting. Thorndike is a person, a family of original settlers. Foster is a original settler. Showalter was named actually for an OSPI official at the time when Showalter was named. Cascade View is obviously a geographic something, and Takula, I think, is a kind of an English version of a Duwamish term meaning hazelnut. So there's a whole variety of things that, this seems a little too restrictive to me. So I guess I'm okay with all the other 2402 through 2409, but I think I'd like to see if we could get a little more community input on the naming one.
Yeah, we can take a look at other model policies that are out there. I've gone through this kind of policy in probably 3 other districts, and it's a balance on wanting to provide clarity about what's acceptable and what's not, without being too prescriptive in a list of things. So
Right.
it's just finding the right language to say, these are the kinds of names or things we would name a school building after. But, you know, for some of the other ones, that's why I think most get to the, national or local prominence, because then you're not really, you know, limited in people. And there's always a review as well. I mean, that's what happens in the procedure. Any name comes to the board for approval anyway. So nothing's going to be named without the board going through a process to be able to, you know, typically if someone's trying to name something, again, having been through that several times, it gets reviewed several times. There's usually quite a bit of write-up on why the name is being selected and any history behind the name, the person, the geographic location, whatever it may be. But we can certainly get some additional input to see if there's anything more in there. Again, I mean, this particular policy to me doesn't have to be too complicated. We just want to be able to provide enough guidance without being too prescriptive. So if you feel it's too prescriptive, that's fine. I mean, we can look for more ability to make it more expansive.
What do other folks have any thoughts on this?
Well, I concur with Director Larson that it shouldn't just be our eyes that look at it. And I would, especially as it pertains to like school mascots, because, you know, this is a reaction to the work that WASDA and other districts have done to remove tribal mascots without that were not agreed upon or in support by our tribal communities. And so I just would be interested in hearing from our community about names, because names are a form of identity and they're and not the only identity. So what if our school wanted to have something else as a mascot, maybe a non-person, non-animal kind of thing? So I don't know. I concur. I would like for us 5 to not be the only decision makers here on this one. Since it is first read, maybe we can get some more input from our district race and equity committee or the cabinet.
Sure, we can do that. And again, some of that language is RCW, so that's not going to change. So that's when we're going out to input, we'll just have to make that clear. This part of the policy is not up for change. We have to follow this based on recent state law. Yeah, we can.
I don't know. There's no. Yeah, I don't know. This one doesn't. I don't see an RCW quote here. Yeah, I agree. We have to look up the RCW and see what it says, but we can maybe be more expansive, maybe than the RCW potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, typically it's hard to be more expansive than the RCW. Usually you can be a little more prescriptive, but we'll find out where that is.
Okay.
But yeah, if there's a RCW, we should always have that cross-reference in there anyway. Yeah.
All right.
I have,
anything else?
oh yeah, I have one or two things. One on the policy, one on the procedure, and then just kind of a comment / question a little bit on the mastery-based learning piece. So first on the 6970 policy, and it may be totally reading this incorrectly, but the paragraph at the bottom that's just the example. So I'm curious what the thought process was behind not including the sentence unless the local tribe has approved the use of appropriate enactment or resolution. Or is that going to be a part of the policy?
Are you talking about the procedure or the policy?
The policy.
6970.
Mm-hmm. Because there's a highlighted piece and then a non-highlighted piece at the bottom, but it would be redundant. So that was why I was assuming that was not a part of the intended draft policy. And so I was curious why that last line, y'all chose to kind of not include that last piece.
Can I answer that? This was on WASDA's website. This is what their model policy has. And as it said, it's an optional alternative language. So you can use the one that isn't highlighted that is above it, or you can use this one that has a little bit more, it has the, unless it's the local tribe has approved the use of the enactment, where the other one just says you can't.
Right.
So it's up to the board to guide which one they would prefer to be in there.
Got it. Thank you so much. My second question is around procedure. So I noticed that the procedure was updated kind of at the top half in relation to facilities and mascots, but not on the bottom section around public spaces within. And I was just curious if that would be a part of the policy or procedure update, and if not, kind of what was the decision or the deciding factors around not updating that to align with the top half of the procedure.
When I updated the procedure, normally the board doesn't have guidance or any action over procedures. I put this as an example. This is another model procedure from WASDA, and that portion that I didn't update is because WASDA doesn't have that portion within their procedure. So at this point, it's time to work with some of the communities that you guys had suggested, the race and equity, our chief academic officer, to figure out how we can update that to align with the policy.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think the reason why I brought it up, it just seems like if we're going to update the procedure as far as naming facilities, the procedure around naming public spaces within should be somewhat consistent. At least I would believe that should be true.
Absolutely, and it will be.
Okay, thank you.
There's additional work.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that that was clear in my brain. Thank you so much, Debbie. And then my last thing, and don't have to necessarily take space for this now, but I look forward to meeting you, Mr. Howard, and talking more with you, because I'd love to hear about what our district's already doing to support mastery-based learning, to ensure that the policy that we're updating actually, like, we have some skin in the game in a sense. So I just want to hear, and look forward to hearing more about how we've already got some of those things in place and how we're promoting that option for our students.
All right. Thank you, Director Hoover. Anything else for first read? Got some input? And so will this come around next month?
The ones that we were able to get the work done and prepared for, yeah, we'll be around for the next one, and the ones that aren't, then we'll get those on the agenda once we've been able to complete some of the work.
I know it's been a lot of work, so thank you, Debbie. All right, we'll move along to action items. Motion to approve the Human Resources Staffing Report.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Right. And then the next item is approval of the technology plan. So any motion for that?
So moved.
Second? Anyone want a second? Any discussion? No
So this one, I appreciate the attempt at trying to apply the race and equity toolkit to this. Is probably one of the first one that really had that presented to us. However, when I look at the rubric for this, for the race and equity toolkit, the question is, the number one question is, who are the underrepresented groups affected by this policy, program, practice, or decision, and what are the potential impacts? And I don't know, in here, I don't really see anything like that in here. And so, I mean, I'm looking for something that talks about, you know, which groups would be impacted by this policy. So, you know, there's discussion here about some questions on the CEE survey related to technology. If that were to be broken down by, you know, race or program group or something, so we could see what those different groups are thinking about this. That could be one form of input, or having some empathy interviews, focus groups or something. I just don't see anything, you know, I see in here discussion about, okay, on the Technology Advisory Committee, we're going to try and get students, families, and staff in the future. But I don't see anything. I mean, it seems like we should at least have a start at, you know, some kind of analysis of how is this impacting, you know, the underrepresented groups. So I'm at this point, unless there's some evidence of that, I would not be wanting to approve this until there's been a little more work done on the race and equity toolkit application.
I concur that maybe even a SWOT analysis to look at what has happened in the last year. There's been several learning opportunities to learn from, and there were, you know, people that might have been harmed. And so, like, I do not feel okay with approving anything responsibly without acknowledging and recognizing and having some really straightforward goals on how to improve. In the future, we'll do it next year, yada, yada, yada. That's code for business as usual. It's not enough. So I wouldn't be approving this as it is either.
I would also add in that piece about the curriculum, in that there's a curriculum named in there that we have not, I don't know if it's gone through a curriculum review, especially with a race and equity lens. It's not a curriculum I've ever seen before. So yeah, that's another thing that makes me uneasy.
I agree. I think that there's a little bit more just kind of involvement and input that could be given before I would feel comfortable approving. I think especially when it comes to the fact that there hasn't been community and student input yet. And I think that's important when we're thinking about access and how lack of access may be impacting our students. And so if we don't really know from their voices, how can we know that we're setting goals that are going to then meet their needs? And I think as far as that race equity toolkit, I want to second what Director Larson said and just thank you for utilizing the toolkit. I really appreciate your time, the time taken to do that. I think for me, even looking at question number 1 on the toolkit, what does your department, division, school district define as a racially equitable outcome related to this issue? It's not super clear. Like, what are tangible, measurable outcomes? How will you know that this is true? That's really the kind of things that I feel like I want to be able to see, because that is what will help us really guide the work. Again, really measurable. This is what equitable access looks like. And that's the kind of, I think, thing that I want to see up to. And then, of course, more community input for what this plan will look like.
Could I speak to some of this, please? Is that okay?
Sure, Mr. Baker, go right ahead.
So if we back up the truck just a little bit, the technology, 4-year technology levy was on the ballot on February 11th, 2020. State law states that any election advocacy must be done on your own time and without district resources. So that required us to form an external community advocacy group. That group was called the Citizens for Takula Schools. And that organization was made up of community members, and they headed up the levy committee and established what their goals would be for the $3.3 million that we were asking from voters. They sent us parameters as far as what they wanted to be included in the levy and what percentage of funding went to projects, maintenance, and staff salaries. One of the major concerns that they had was that the creative learning labs were in 3 of our schools, but not 1 of our schools. And they determined that to be an equity issue. And therefore, salaries became a big, important part of the technology levy, that we could level the playing field and all students would have access to quality STEAM programming K through 8. So that was one thing that they wanted to get done and that we did get done. The levy passed overwhelmingly with over a 60% approval rating from the citizens of Takula, based on what was in the technology plan during that year. In fact, many of the advocates for this levy would ask stakeholders to go to the TSD website and look at the 4-year technology plan and what their monies or funds or taxes would be spent on. So it was overwhelmingly a will of the people to put this in place for our students and our staff and our community to make this happen. So there wasn't just the tech advisory committee that the district is a part of. It was a community-based effort, a lot of work, a lot of hours, and Dr. Herman can speak to this, to get this levy passed and to inform our public about what we were including in it and what we were doing for students. So my apprehension is changing this plan too much away from what the voters voted on and what the Citizens for Tukwila Schools Committee put forward to the voters. And so that's just a concern that I have about this 4-year plan. And I feel like we've delivered very well during distance learning and other areas of this. And so I just wanted to put that out there and just say that maybe you weren't aware of this committee, but whenever you run a levy, the public has to be involved and have input in what happens. And that's exactly what happened in this case.
So I think there are a couple of things that we'll need to take a look at. One is obviously this is an update that would go beyond the existence of the current technology levy and kind of bridges to the next one. So I think taking a look at the feedback from board directors, what you've given us, as well as making sure we're following through with what we had said we were going to do in the levy, which is an important thing to do to make sure that future levies pass, because if people vote for something, they want to make sure that you're following through with what you said you were going to do. So I think there are ways we can look at this particular technology plan, make sure that it's being inclusive of our students, but still adhering to what we said we were going to do in the levy. So there's definitely latitude to do that. So we'll take that feedback from the board and then bring this back once we have built upon that a little bit more. And we know, as has been pointed out, I mean, we've said that using the race and equity tool is going to be clunky at first. And so this is just part of the growing of using that tool. So I appreciate the feedback from everybody though.
Yeah, and I appreciate the background information from you, Mr. Baker, that I think it's a yes and. So yes, this is the parameters. This is what our constituents are agreeing to pay for with their tax dollar money, right? Their dollars. And how are we being accountable? How are we making sure that the impact, you know, our intent is the impact, or if there's anything that we can do to be better in the work that we're doing in our district, how are we paying attention to that? What, you know, that in my mind, you know, having things happen that aren't always positive is a learning opportunity. It's an opportunity to recognize that maybe there's something we weren't aware of, and here's what we're doing about it now, or here's what we've learned from this experience. And so I just would want that input, not just on the initial plan, but how we're implementing the plan, and if we are responding to needs as we implement the plan. So I think it's very much a yes then from our transformational model.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I don't, yeah, the issue is we need to kind of hear from the different communities that, yeah, it's going okay, or, you know, maybe you need to tweak this or that. You know, I wouldn't anticipate some major shift. I wouldn't say, okay, you should shut one of the creative learning labs at one of the schools or something. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but some, you know, yeah, update from how folks feel like it's going, and maybe there's some tweaks, and maybe it's all going fine. But just that, I mean, that's kind of the guts of, you know, what the Race and Equity Toolkit is about, is making sure that you have that contact with some of the community members, and particularly some of the underrepresented groups, to make sure that you're on track, or you need to move a little bit. So
yep, we'll bring this back at a later date once we have that feedback incorporated.
So I don't know, Chair, do you want me to move to table this? Is that appropriate?
Yeah, we could go ahead and move to table item B at this time, and then we can move it on to a future meeting. So,
okay, so moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, and all right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 I heard ayes. All right. All right, so we'll do that. We'll move on to executive session. At this time, we may be discussing legal counsel. And so do we have executive session this evening?
We do.
All right. So at this time, I guess we go into executive session. So I think we'll be thanking our guests and panelists at this time, and walk us through, Dr. Herndon, what's going to happen next.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll pause the recording. Generally, you give an estimated time of when we would come out of executive session. In this case, I don't anticipate it being more than 10 or 15 minutes, so we can say 15 minutes. And then after we're out of executive session, we would come back into general session and then adjourn for the evening.
Okay.
I think to be legal, you just need to read that little sentence at the bottom.
Yeah.
Executive session to discuss with legal, blah, blah,
Sure.
blah.
Sure.
Maybe Debbie needs to move it up a little bit.
Yeah.
There you go.
And my eyesight is failing me here.
Sorry, it's
No, it's good. I enlarged it, so I've got it now. To discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation to which the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in the official capacity is or is likely to become a party when public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the agency per RCW 4230-110I.
So at this time, we'll need to ask anybody who's not to be included in the executive session to please exit our meeting.
And am I co-host, Ms. Kaur?
Thank you, attendees. Thank you, panelists, for
You
your
are.
time this evening.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm pausing.
Yes, so as soon as we still have some participants in here that need to be. Okay. Ms. Marcelane is now promoted to panelist. Okay. All right, so I will be exiting. I have to give Flip host abilities first, otherwise it'll end the whole meeting. All right. Thank you all.
Great,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Bye.
All right.
All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right. And then let's go ahead and seeing that there's no other business, we'll go ahead and conclude this meeting. Have a good night, everybody.
Great, thank you.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you all. Bye.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
You
too.
too.